The rooftop restaurant was a jewel box suspended in the twilight sky, overlooking the sprawling, glittering expanse of the city. The air was warm for an autumn evening, carrying the scent of expensive perfume and the faint, savory aroma from the open kitchen. It was our rehearsal dinner, a night that was supposed to be a perfect prelude to the main event. Our families and closest friends were gathered, a boisterous, happy crowd, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of fairy lights and candles. I looked at my fiancée Maya, her smile brighter than any of the city lights below, and felt a tidal wave of love so profound it almost buckled my knees. My three best friends, my groomsmen, Ben, Liam, and Noah, were laughing at a joke my father had just told. My world was perfect, a collection of all the people I loved most, gathered in one place to celebrate us. The evening flowed like vintage champagne, smooth and intoxicating. Speeches were made, stories were told, and embarrassing anecdotes from my childhood were shared, all met with gales of warm, affectionate laughter. I felt an incredible sense of belonging, a feeling of being exactly where I was supposed to be in the universe. My groomsmen, the three men I considered my brothers, had been my constants through every phase of my life. Ben, the steady, reliable one I'd known since kindergarten. Liam, the quiet, thoughtful artist. And Noah, the wildlife friend who had gotten me into and out of more trouble than I could count. Their presence at my side felt like an unbreakable shield, a testament to a lifetime of loyalty. Then it was my sister Chloe's turn to give her toast as the maid of honor. She stood, a vision in a silk dress, her smile a little too bright, a little too sharp at the edges. There had always been a competitive streak between us, a subtle sibling rivalry that had never quite faded with age. But tonight, I expected a truce. I expected sincerity. She raised her champagne flute, the crystal catching the light. "I'd like to propose a toast," she began, her voice carrying easily across the rooftop terrace. "To my brother, Ethan, who has always had such a big, trusting heart. And to his beautiful bride, Maya." The words seemed genuine enough, but there was an undercurrent I couldn't quite place, a faint dissonance in the melody of the evening. She paused, taking a deliberate sip of her champagne, letting the anticipation build. Her eyes scanned the table, moving from my face to Maya's, then lingering for a fraction of a second on Ben, Liam, and Noah, who had all suddenly gone very still. "Maya is such a special person," Chloe continued, her voice dripping with a cloying sweetness that made the hairs on my arm stand up. "She's a woman who knows what she wants and isn't afraid to go after it. She has such a passion for life, and for exploring her options. She's a perfect fit for our family, and especially for this group of friends." My smile felt tight, my body rigid. I knew, with a sudden, sick certainty, that this was not a toast. It was an execution. Final words were delivered with the precision of an assassin. She smiled brightly, raised her glass higher, and said, "So, let's give a big cheer to the bride, who dated all three groomsmen." The sentence hung in the air, a grotesque and impossible statement. A champagne flute slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the stone floor, the sound echoing the complete and utter demolition of my world. The chatter died instantly. Every eye at the table, every eye on that rooftop, darted from Chloe's triumphant, smiling face, to the horrified, ashen faces of my three best friends, to the utter devastation on the face of the woman I was supposed to marry the next day. And then, finally, all those eyes landed on me. The silence that followed the shattering of the glass was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and life from the rooftop. In that frozen moment, I saw everything. With a horrifying, preternatural clarity, I saw the guilt etched on Ben's face, a deep, miserable shame. I saw the panic in Liam's wide eyes, a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming disaster. I saw the desperate, cornered look on Noah's face as he stared down at his plate. They weren't looks of confusion or denial. They were the faces of guilty men, of co-conspirators, whose secret had just been brutally exposed. My three best friends, my brothers, were all part of a history I knew nothing about. Then my gaze found Maya. She was a statue carved from ice, her face completely drained of its vibrant life, leaving only a pale, fragile mask. Her eyes, which had been so full of love and laughter just moments before, were now wide, dark pools of sheer terror. She wouldn't look at me. She couldn't. Her inability to meet my gaze was the final, damning piece of evidence, a silent confession that plunged a knife deep into my chest and twisted. The woman I had given my heart to, the woman whose past I thought I knew, had a secret history with the three most important men in my life. The betrayal wasn't singular. It was a conspiracy. The frozen tableau shattered into a chaos of hushed, frantic whispers and scraping chairs. My mother, her face a mask of disbelief and fury, was the first to move, grabbing Chloe's arm. "What have you done?" she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper. My father just stared at his daughter, his expression one of profound, utter disappointment. Maya's parents were on their feet, their faces a mixture of confusion and a dawning, protective anger. They moved towards their daughter, creating a physical barrier as if to shield her from the shrapnel of the explosion my sister had just detonated. The perfect union of two families had devolved into a war zone in the space of a single sentence. I felt like I was drowning, the sounds of the room fading into a dull, underwater roar. The carefully constructed reality of my life, the belief in the loyalty of my friends and the honesty of my fiancé, had been revealed as a complete and utter sham. I was the fool, the last to know, the clueless groom smiling for pictures while my entire world was a lie. I felt a desperate, suffocating need for air, for an escape from the hundreds of pitying, curious eyes that were now fixed on me. I stood up, my chair screeching against the stone floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the tense atmosphere. Without a word to anyone, I turned and walked away. I pushed through the stunned crowd, past the waiters who were frozen in place, and through the glass doors that led back into the restaurant. I didn't look back. I couldn't bear to see the wreckage, to see Maya's face, to see the guilt on the faces of the men I had called my brothers. I stumbled out of the hotel and onto the street, the cool night air hitting me like a physical slap. The city, which had looked so beautiful and full of promise from the rooftop, now seemed like a cold, indifferent maze of concrete and glaring lights. I was completely and utterly alone, a groom with no wedding, no friends, and no idea who the woman I loved truly was. The door to our apartment clicked shut behind me, the sound echoing in the profound silence of a space that suddenly felt hollow and foreign. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the familiar rooms, now cast in the eerie, shifting shadows of passing headlights, and every object seemed to mock me. The wedding gift from my aunt on the coffee table, the photos of us smiling on the mantelpiece, the two coffee mugs sitting side by side in the dish rack. They were all props from a play whose final act had just been violently rewritten. I sank onto the couch, the plush cushions offering no comfort, and waited. The confrontation was inevitable, a second storm following the hurricane. Maya arrived. An hour later, her key turning in the lock with a hesitant, fearful click. She stepped inside, a solitary figure silhouetted against the hallway light. She looked small and broken. The silence that stretched between us was a chasm, filled with my unspoken questions and her unspoken truths. When she finally spoke, her voice was a raw, trembling whisper, a stark contrast to the confident, joyful woman I thought I knew. She didn't offer denials or excuses. She simply started at the beginning. Her confession, a painful, halting narrative of a past I had never known existed. It had all happened in college, years before I was ever in the picture. The five of them, Maya, Ben, Liam, and Noah, were part of an inseparable, tight-knit group of friends. They had shared a house, shared classes, shared everything. She and Ben had been the first, a serious, year-long relationship that had been the central romance of their friend group, until it imploded in a messy, painful breakup. A few months later, seeking comfort and validation, she had a brief, regrettable, and alcohol-fueled rebound fling with Noah. Something they both immediately knew was a mistake, and quickly buried. The relationship with Liam, she explained, was different. It happened the following year. It was quieter, deeper, and more emotionally intense than what she'd had with the others. They had connected on an artistic and intellectual level, but it was fraught with the tension of their shared history with the other two. It lasted for 6 months before they mutually decided it was too complicated, too laden with the ghosts of past relationships to ever have a real future. After that, the group dynamic shifted, and a quiet, unspoken pact of silence was formed around that period of their lives. It was, she said, a messy, complicated chapter from her early 20s that she was deeply ashamed of. Her reasons for not telling me were a tangled web of fear and shame. How could I explain it, Ethan? She pleaded, tears finally tracing paths down her pale cheeks. How could I tell the man I love that I have this impossibly complicated history with his 3 best friends? I was so afraid you would see me as damaged, or promiscuous, or that it would destroy your friendships. I convinced myself that it was my past, that it had no bearing on us. The love I have for you is real. It's the most real thing in my life. I was just so terrified that the truth of my past would poison the beauty of our future. But the poison wasn't in the truth. It was in the secret. Her decision to hide it had turned her past into a loaded gun, and my sister had just pulled the trigger the next day. I summoned them to my apartment. Not Maya, not my sister, but the three men who were supposed to be my brothers. Ben, Liam, and Noah. They arrived together, a united front of guilt, their faces pale and drawn. They stood awkwardly in my living room, the space that had hosted countless hours of our laughter and camaraderie now feeling like a courtroom. The silence was thick with years of unspoken truths, a heavy blanket of deceit that was suffocating me. I didn't offer them a seat. I just stood there, my arms crossed, letting them squirm in the uncomfortable silence, forcing them to be the first to speak. Ben, ever the leader, took the lead. His voice was low and strained, a stark contrast to his usual confident tone. "Ethan, man, we are so sorry," he began, the words sounding hollow and inadequate. "We should have told you years ago, but it was complicated. It all happened before you and Maya were even a thing. It was a messy part of all our lives. And when you two got together and were so happy, we made a choice. We figured it was better to just let the past be the past. We thought we were protecting you, protecting the friendship, protecting everything." His explanation, his claim of protection, felt like a deep insult. They hadn't protected me. They had managed me, handled me, treated me like a child who couldn't handle the truth. Liam spoke next, his voice barely a whisper. He couldn't look me in the eye, his gaze fixed on a spot on the floor. "He's right, but that doesn't make it okay," he mumbled. "I always felt wrong about it. Every time the five of us were in a room together, it felt like I was holding my breath. There were so many times I wanted to say something, but there was never a right time. How do you bring it up? Hey Ethan, by the way." It felt like dropping a bomb. I was a coward. I chose the easy path of silence over the difficult path of honesty. There's no excuse for it. His confession of cowardice was at least honest, but it offered little comfort. It just confirmed that my entire inner circle was predicated on a lie. Noah, who was usually the jokester, the one to lighten any mood, was uncharacteristically defensive. "Look, it was ancient history," he said, a touch of his old bravado creeping into his voice. "It was college. We were all kids. It didn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. Chloe is the one who blew this up into something it's not. We didn't do anything wrong to you. Not really." His attempt to deflect the blame, to minimize the monumental deceit, was the final straw. It showed me he still didn't grasp the fundamental nature of the betrayal. It wasn't about the history. It was about the conspiracy of silence between the people I trusted most in the world. I looked at the three of them, at the faces I had known for most of my life, and I felt a profound and desolate sense of alienation. They were not my brothers. They were members of a club to which I had never been invited, guardians of a secret history that defined their relationships with each other and with my fiancée. My friendship with them, which I had believed to be a cornerstone of my life, was a facade. They had chosen their shared secret over my right to the truth. "Get out," I said, my voice cold and devoid of emotion. "All of you, just get out." They turned and left, without another word, leaving me utterly alone in the wreckage of a brotherhood that had never been real. My apartment became my tomb. The city outside, with its vibrant life and indifferent pulse, might as well have been on another planet. For 3 days, I didn't leave. I didn't answer my phone, which buzzed incessantly with calls from my parents, from Chloe, from Maya. The silence was my only companion, a heavy, suffocating presence that allowed the same reel of memories and betrayals to play over and over in my head. The joyous faces at the dinner, Chloe's triumphant smile, the guilt on my friends' faces, Maya's silent terror. It was a carousel of pain, and I couldn't get off. I felt hollowed out, a ghost haunting the ruins of my own life. On the 4th day, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't Maya or my friends. It was my uncle, David. He was my father's younger brother, a retired literature professor who lived a quiet life in a small town a few hours north of the city. He stood in my doorway, his kind, weathered face etched with concern, holding a bag of groceries. "Your father called me," he said simply. "He was worried. I figured you could use some company that wasn't part of the immediate blast zone." He walked in, and like my friend Sam had done in a past life that felt like it belonged to someone else, he began to impose a gentle order on my chaos. Opening windows and making coffee, we sat in the kitchen, the sunlight a stark contrast to the gloom that had settled over my soul. I told him everything, the words tumbling out, raw and unfiltered. He listened with the patient, focused attention of a man who has spent a lifetime understanding human nature through the pages of great novels. He didn't interrupt, he didn't judge. He just let me pour out all the pain, the anger, the confusion, the profound sense of foolishness that was consuming me. When I was done, he was quiet for a long time, sipping his coffee, his gaze thoughtful. "This isn't a simple story of heroes and villains, Ethan," he said finally, his voice a calm, steady anchor. "What your sister did was cruel and unforgivable. What your friends and Maya did was a betrayal born from cowardice and fear. They made a pact of silence, thinking they were protecting a fragile peace. But secrets like that are a cancer. They don't preserve peace, they just postpone the war." He spoke about the messy, complicated nature of love and loyalty, of how good people can make terrible, selfish decisions when they are scared. He wasn't excusing their actions, but he was framing them in a context of flawed humanity. His perspective was a lifeline. He helped me see that my obstacle wasn't just the betrayal itself, but my own black and white view of the world. I had seen love and friendship as absolute, unbreakable things. Now I was being forced to confront the reality that they are fragile, complex, and require constant, difficult honesty to survive. Uncle David's support wasn't about telling me what to do. It was about helping me ask the right questions. Could I ever separate Maya, the person, from Maya's past? Could friendship survive such a fundamental breach of trust? He didn't have the answers, but he helped me realize that finding them was a journey I had to take, and it couldn't happen inside the four walls of my apartment. I took a leave of absence from my job and spent the next 2 weeks at my uncle's house. It was a small, rustic place, surrounded by towering pine trees, the air clean and crisp. The change of scenery was a balm to my raw nerves. I spent my days on long, solitary hikes, the physical exertion a welcome distraction from the emotional turmoil. In the quiet of the woods, with only the sound of the wind in the trees for company, I began the difficult work of reckoning with my shattered life. I had to dissect the betrayals, understand their different textures. Before I could even think about what came next, my anger towards Chloe was cold, hard, and absolute. I saw her actions for what they were, a deliberate, malicious act of sabotage. It was not about protecting me. It was about hurting me, about reasserting her own importance by destroying mine. I wrote her a letter, a long, painful one that I never intended to send. I poured all my anger and hurt onto the page, and in doing so, I found a sense of release. I realized I could forgive her in the abstract, for my own peace of mind, but I could never trust her again. Our relationship was fundamentally and irrevocably broken. A boundary had to be drawn. The betrayal by my friends was more complex. I thought about our years of friendship, the countless moments of loyalty and support. Their silence was a profound failure, but was it born of malice? I came to the conclusion that it wasn't. It was born from a misguided pact, from youthful cowardice, that had calcified over time into an unbearable secret. They had chosen their shared history over their individual responsibility to me. Forgiveness here seemed possible, but I knew our friendship could never be what it was. The easy, unthinking trust was gone, and rebuilding it would be a long, arduous process. If it was possible at all, then there was Maya. This was the most difficult reckoning of all. I had to separate the woman I loved from the secret she had kept. I thought about her kindness, her intelligence, her laugh. The love we shared felt real, vibrant, and true. Was I willing to let a past that didn't involve me destroy a future that did? Her lie was a significant breach, a sign of a fear and shame that ran deep. But was it a sign of a flawed character or a flawed decision? I began to see that love isn't about finding a perfect person with a perfect past. It's about finding an imperfect person whose flaws and baggage you are willing to navigate with honesty and grace. My personal growth came from this painful process of differentiation. I learned that love and trust are not the same thing. I loved my friends, but I no longer trusted them. I loved Maya, but my trust in her was deeply wounded. I returned to the city not with all the answers, but with a newfound sense of clarity. I knew that my future couldn't be a simple return to the past. Whatever came next would have to be built on a new foundation, one forged in the fire of this crisis, one based not on blind faith, but on a clear-eyed understanding of the flawed, messy, and complicated people I had chosen to love. The first and hardest conversation was with Maya. We met for a walk along the river, the gray water churning under a sky that threatened rain. I told her I had forgiven her. I explained that I understood the fear and shame that had motivated her silence. I saw the wave of relief wash over her, the hope that this was the prelude to reconciliation. But I went on to explain that forgiveness and marriage were two different things. I couldn't stand at an altar, looking at her, with my 3 former best friends standing behind me. The symbolism was too potent, the shared history too toxic. The wedding was off. I told her that if there was any chance for us, it had to start from zero. We had to dismantle everything, and see what, if anything, was left when all the lies and secrets were cleared away. It would be a long, painful process of rebuilding trust from the ground up, with no guarantee of success. It was not the happy ending she wanted, but it was the only honest path forward I could offer. We left it there, 2 people who still loved each other, standing on opposite sides of a chasm created by a secret, with only a fragile, uncertain bridge between us. The future was unwritten, and for the first time, that felt more terrifying than hopeful. Next I met with Ben, Liam, and Noah. I told them I understood their misguided intentions, and that I forgave them for their cowardice. But I also told them that our friendship, as we knew it, was over. The effortless camaraderie, the inner circle, the brotherhood that was a casualty of their silence. I explained that trust, once broken on such a fundamental level, doesn't just reappear. Our relationships would have to be rebuilt on new terms, individually, and with no guarantee that they would ever regain their former strength. It was a somber, painful conversation, the official end of an era for the 4 of us. Months have now passed. Maya and I are in therapy, both individually and as a couple. It is the hardest work I have ever done. Some days are filled with hope, others are shadowed by the ghosts of the past. I am learning to navigate my relationships with my former friends on new, more cautious terms. My relationship with my sister is one of distant, polite civility, a permanent scar. I am not the same man I was on that rooftop. I am more cautious, more questioning, but also more honest with myself and with others. I have learned that perfect stories are for movies. Real life is messy, complicated, and forged in the difficult choices we make after everything falls apart. We all have a circle of friends, a group we trust with our lives. But what if the biggest secret they share is about the person you love? What is the one truth that could shatter your entire world? So many of us are forced to choose between a comfortable lie and a devastating truth. Tell me your story in the comments below. Have you ever been the last to know a secret that everyone else seemed to share? Your experience is a powerful reminder that we're all navigating this messy thing called life. If this story made you think, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who understands that the deepest betrayals often come from the people standing right next to us.